I recently sat down with a friend for coffee, and she encouraged me to record this episode. There have been so many people who've joined us at the Change Course podcast over the last couple months, and I'd like to say hello and welcome. And you probably want to know a little bit about me. So, here we go. Let me tell you my story about how I got here, what inspired me, and where I think we're going. I'm Natalia Loback, and this is the Change Course podcast. I've spent my career leading complex change and transformation in organizations. And over my career, I've discovered what makes complex transformational change stick. Connected change is all about leading successful change within the context of the organization. And here at the Change Course podcast, we're all about making change sustainable. So listen in, drop us a like, a comment, and let us know how we can help you connect and change. First of all, a huge thank you to all of the listeners who've joined us here on the Change Course podcast over the past couple weeks. I'm excited you're here and welcome. Little bit about me. I introduce myself in every intro, but I'm Natalia, and I started the Change Course podcast to help people become better change leaders. And sometimes we talk about what you need to know as a new change manager. I talk about what I've learned over the course of my career and different topics that I'm covering with clients or executives that I'm working with. And then I also talk about if you are a leader who is getting asked to lead a change and you've never done it before, where can you start and what can you do? So that's what we're all about here. I'm the founder and principal of two companies. So I have a consulting company. We do change management at various global clients. It's called Charthouse Advisory Services. And I also am the founder of a change approach called Connected Change. So you can find out more about Charthouse at www.charthouse.ca. And then Connected Change is its own thing. That's what I'm really working on building right now. And I want to share everything that I've learned with all of those new change managers out there who might be seeking for this. I want to share it with change leaders because what I've learned over the past 15 years, managing complex change in big organizations, complex organizations, I want to be able to share that with you so that you can be successful too. These things that I've discovered about change are really incredible and really impactful. And I think that some of the other learning out there, some of the other methodologies people are using, they're great and they're really good for understanding how to break down a process or how to do change in one specific way. But if you are someone who wants to make a career in change, you're going to be working at various different organizations. This is not something you're just going to do once. And when you move from organization to organization, you'll notice that as you're trying to apply the learning and trying to apply these, big methodologies that you've studied and practiced, that one cookie cutter approach does not successful change make. So, what I've learned is how to take the unique aspects of each organization and harness those for change success. That's what Connected Change is all about. And no surprise here, but it has a lot to do with the relationships inside the organization, how people relate to each other, how they relate to power and leadership and authority, and also those amazing connections that we build when we work together. Sometimes they're friendships, sometimes they're just colleague relationships. I'm not going to, say one, it has to be this way, or, two, it is always this way. every organization has unique DNA. So you need to build a change approach that matches the DNA of the organization. That's what Connected Change is all about. So check it out, and I look forward to you joining me on this journey. So, as my friend had said, I started talking a little bit about where I got started in change and how all of this came together. And she started laughing and said to me, "Don't you think that people who listen to the podcast would want to hear some of this?" And I said, "Oh, goodness, I'd never really even thought about that." And honestly, I'm not really one to share my life story with everyone I meet. So this is a little bit of a point of vulnerability for me, putting this out there really for everyone to digest and hear and all of that. But in sharing this with you, I hope that maybe you'll see yourself in this story too, because I'm sure we have lots of things in common. In fact, I pride myself on being able to find something in common with just about everybody I meet. And my approach to change and to what I do and to life in general is curiosity. I really am curious. I want to know. I'm interested. And I am not really interested in trying to apply my preconceived notions onto someone else's life or what they have to tell me. And there is so much opportunity in curiosity. So that is how I generally approach my life and my relationships and change. And all of this is curiosity. I'm interested. I want to learn. I want to hear and see what I can learn from that and what I can apply. And does that challenge me to think differently about things? So where did it all begin? Honestly, I have to go back, like way, way back. And I am of the generation that grew up before technology. So I have living memory of when we didn't have phones in our pockets and when our televisions couldn't stream movies. You know, I was of that last part of the generation that spent most of my time after school playing outside with my friends and with my parents having absolutely no idea where I was at any given time. I mean, we used to go down to this little ravine behind my best friend's house and play in the creek, like in the pond, for hours. And no one would have any idea that we were there. Generally, we didn't see anyone. Like, we were alone a lot of the time. And this was totally okay. It was totally acceptable. I can give you a little bit of a sense of my vintage when me and our neighborhood friends would all get together, because there was like a large pack of us feral children who would run around together. They were primarily boys, except for my one best friend who was a girl. But she was a little bit younger than us and she went to a different school. So, you know, I sometimes played with the boys by myself, and they were always, this was like Return of the Jedi. So they were always Han Solo and Luke Skywalker and Ewoks and whatnot. And I was Princess Leia. But let me tell you that my Princess Leia was no wilting flower. And I do love Carrie Fisher for this. Princess Leia was absolutely a ball buster. So let me tell you, it was fantastic. Those were days of incredible freedom. I was one of the first children in my class and in my school to get a computer. And I remember actually doing a project for the very first time, and I wrote a book of poetry. That's like an elementary school project. I don't have that talent, but I wrote a book and I printed it all and then illustrated all of the pages because my dad had a laser printer. And so I could actually paint over top of the pages without the ink bleeding. Pretty amazing, right? And so I remember that distinctly, and how impressed my teacher was. She was like, "Oh my goodness, you figured out how to like paint over top of this." I don't think she'd seen a laser printer before, but she was quite impressed. And I remember that as being something very significant because I was one of the first in my class to embrace technology. one of the very first. Nobody else had a computer at home at this point. I also come from an entrepreneurial family. So my father actually started and ran many businesses over the course of my life. And he actually started a software business. He was working in a volunteer capacity at our church, and he was the accountant, he was the treasurer, and started getting really annoyed about having to handwrite all of the tax receipts for everyone. So, okay, let's make this totally clear. We had a computer. He was already using Microsoft Excel. I mean, the early version of it to track all of the donations, right? And then the tax rules here in Canada are that you have to issue donation receipts for a certain amount that's given over the year. So you actually need to know how much people give over the course of the calendar year and add that up, because there's a minimum for which you cannot claim tax credit. And then, if you go beyond that, then you can claim it. So you have to know, did everybody make it past this minimum? Okay, easy today, not so easy back then when everyone was giving you cash in envelopes and personal checks. Didn't work so well, right? So he was using Excel to track this, but then was getting really annoyed about having to write these receipts out and doing that tax accounting for this charitable organization. So he wrote a computer program, and that was his first business. I named it. I named the business. I'm very proud of it. It was called Church Mouse. I thought it was so cute. And I helped my father by stuffing envelopes with flyers and sending them out to charitable organizations across Canada. Honestly, we did pretty well. And he had really honed in on a niche problem that people were trying to solve and they didn't have good solutions for. And so it was that early stage of, we have a computer, but we don't know how to use it. And he filled that gap, right? Incredible opportunity. Once some of the other programs came out, I seem to remember something called Quicken. There was QuickBooks. These things have all morphed into other things nowadays. But in that gap between when he identified the problem and larger software vendors came out with something better, there were a few years there where this was what we focused on. And that had a huge impact on me and made a huge impression on me early on around what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to start a business, what it means to find an opportunity and kind of go for it. But then also realize when your time's kind of run out. If another better product or program comes along, how long do you hang on? And I'll be honest, we didn't hang on that long. He'd already moved on to the next thing. And that's kind of part of what I talk about with change, right? Use your opportunity. Use the opportunity, see where it is, and go for it. But then when the opportunity is done, you've got to be looking for the next opportunity. So a little bit about how my early years and my childhood impacted my life and where I am today. I always thought I was going to be a physician. I always thought I was going to be a doctor. I love healthcare. It's one of the areas that I am most passionate about. And I devoted the early part of my career to helping and being present and working in healthcare. So I did a Bachelor of Science at the University of Waterloo, which is our polytechnical university here in Ontario. It's probably the leading technology university in Canada. It's amazing. I mean, if you've heard about BlackBerry and Research in Motion, I was there during those amazing years of when that was all happening. It was a vibe. It was interesting. I mean, that was incredible. Every single person that I was socializing with was working there. I mean, it was legendary. It was a really interesting and special time, let me tell you. But that was one of the things that really put my school on the map. And having this exposure to technology throughout what was actually a Bachelor of Science and a health studies focused degree was incredibly valuable. And as I look back, I can see that amazing impact that it had. So I thought I was going to be a medical doctor. And so I thought, you know what? I didn't pass my exam. Let me tell you, I failed that spectacularly. I didn't pass the exam on the first try. And let me tell you, like, okay, fail spectacularly is not really, accurate. I did very well, but I didn't do well enough to get 100% of the schools that I applied to say yes to me. And I didn't have a lot of, my family didn't have a lot of financial means, so it wasn't an option for me to go abroad. So looking at a US school that might have had more availability for me to come, I would have definitely made it into a bunch of US medical schools, definitely would have made it into where I really wanted to go, which was like in the Caribbean. Let me tell you, that would have been amazing. But I didn't have the financial means to make that happen. And so I made a decision about what I was going to do next. And so I decided, you know what, we're going to try this again, but I am going to spend a little bit of time getting some experience, and then I'm going to go back and give it another kick at the can. So I ended up working as a research assistant at a children's hospital here in an immunology research lab. And this is where, again, I came in as a research student. So I was on a grant for the summer, and the grant program was fantastic. I mean, we had a salaried position for 4 months during the school break, and you got to work at the top children's research hospital in the country. Incredible stuff. So I worked in the cardiac immunology or cardiac transplant immunology lab. And I helped people in the lab, because there was a whole staffed lab there, run experiments about how babies and infants' immune systems respond to transplanted organs. And let me make this really clear, right? Like, if a baby requires a heart transplant, this is a really serious and heart-wrenching decision. This is not experimental by any means, right? This is the only course of action to save often this child or this infant's life. So what we were doing was we were looking at some of the results, and then we were also looking at the basis of the immunology. And so using some other models to look at how we could dig down and understand what was happening in the infant immune system. Let me tell you, we don't know anything about the infant immune system still. I mean, it's almost 20 years later, and we're still learning what it means and how that works. And we've learned a little bit, but not a whole lot. So in that environment, I ran around and basically figured out, okay, they have a huge gap here in terms of project management and grant writing and being able to run some of these experiments when we're actually looking at analyzing immunological results from these patients. And so what did I do? I filled a gap. I found a gap and I filled it. And I essentially wrote the grant applications that funded 2 years of my work in that lab, because no one else had time to do it. I mean, I was working for 2 absolutely amazing women physicians. They had families. They were very devoted to their work, but they didn't have evenings and weekends to devote into writing grants and looking, they wanted to make sure their lab was sustainable, but this was hard for them to do. It's you only have so much time, right? So I was like, yeah, I can do that, and walked right in and filled that gap as quickly as I could. I also had, from the background in technology, was this understanding of data analysis and data analytics, very early on, right? But I started setting up databases. I was like, okay, if you're going to collect this data, you better be able to analyze it. And let me show you how you can do that. So started using very early tools in Microsoft Access, using some Excel-based stuff to help them analyze this amazing data. And what came out of it was publication after publication after publication. Why? Because we were able to take the data that we had and analyze it and harness it and use it in ways to look at trends and conclusions and repackage it. This was all stuff we already had. This wasn't new, but this helped really take it to the next level and mine an area of value that previously we had really been unable to tap into. So after this, I realized that my goal in life of becoming a physician wasn't going to be it. And there's a few reasons for that, which I won't get into. But while I was at the hospital, I met a person who had recently finished an MBA and was working in strategy. And I said, wow, that's really cool. I think that's what I want to do instead. And so I started researching and looking at what I could do and ended up applying to an MBA program at York University, the Schulich School of Business. They had an incredible health industry management MBA, and it was one of the only ones in the country. Not only that, but they had this incredible international view and international exposure. And when I looked at the programs I wanted to be a part of, this was important to me. I'm like, Canada's great. I mean, don't get me wrong, but there is a whole world out there of stuff happening, and I kind of want to have a bit more exposure to that. So off I went. Through that time, I continued to work in healthcare. So I, went on to work at a place called the Canadian Institute of Health Information. There, I actually did data analytics for a while. Pretty interesting stuff. And I worked on my very first transformation program. And that changed the whole course of my career. That one experience. And we had an incredible team that came together, and it was just an incredible 2-year project that I worked on, and it totally changed my life. And that was when I realized, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what I want to be doing. So for those people who think, you need to know what you're doing really early on in life, no, you don't. Like, you can figure it out along the way. You just keep following those things that bring you incredible joy. And this was one of them. That totally changed what I wanted to do. So I went in, did the MBA. I had another position that I had started and then realized that there were some government funding changes. I'm like, this isn't going to last. So I actually stopped the job for a little while. I was doing MBA part-time while working. And I just went in full steam ahead and finished my MBA. And one of the reasons was because I wanted to work on a final project that was going to be based in India. And so my only opportunity to do that was if I lined up my last 8 months with the September to June school year, and that I lined up my last 8 months with this particular cohort that was going to go through and work on this particular project. And the project was to work with a large manufacturing company in India, which is now actually a global manufacturing company, and work with them on their corporate social responsibility program, which for them was to work with their vulnerable populations that they were relying on for their supply chain and distribution, work with the vulnerable populations around HIV/AIDS transmission in India, which was at the time a growing and mounting health and public health concern. And so this program was all about change. And I actually went and worked there for about a month, maybe a little longer than a month. And that was, again, another hugely transformative experience in my life. Not because I was, traveling around and, doing that sort of thing. It wasn't that at all. It was about understanding the work and how in this very different culture from my own, how things worked, how things were organized, and how change happened. And we were seeking to help the leader of this organization make a change. And we were successful. It was an incredible experience. So once I graduated, I thought, you know what? I love this healthcare stuff. I'm going to go into consulting. And that's where I built some of my early entrepreneurial skills in terms of being able to flip that over and actually start my own business. So consulting experience was a really big part of that. And then I ended up going back into technology transformation in healthcare. So all of these things starting to come together and make this amazing transformational career happen. And so I made the choice. I was like, I want to go back into technology adoption in the physician community in healthcare. And I did. And I ended up working in an organization that was looking at helping physician offices adopt electronic medical records. And that was amazing. After I did that and the program ended, I moved on into the parent organization and started working on a multi-year business transformation initiative. And we transformed everything. So this was all around back office technology implementation. And I spent 5 years doing that, managing and running multiple transformation projects, a portfolio of transformation, and really working through some of those pieces that started to come together and form connected change. Why? Because this organization was really unique. And the previous organization that I'd worked on, while it was new, had inherited a lot of the characteristics of this organization that I was in. And it was an organization that had a huge amount of organizational history. And this was very difficult to change. This made the environment of adopting new process and new technology incredibly difficult, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it was kind of how the organization operated. And they just had a way about them where, it worked, so why change it? Let's just keep going. And so working through change in a culture like this helped me to start to pull together those early pieces and that early thinking around connected change. Because I came into an organization that had experienced an incredible amount of change failure. Why? Because the previous change efforts had not paid attention to politics outside the organization, but also inside the organization. They did not pay attention to the power relationships, the power structure, and those who had influence in the organization. The previous change efforts had completely ignored the culture and just gone by the recipe. And the failed efforts had not taken into account the historical context of the organization, nor had they worked on changing the stories and the way people were talking about change and talking about the future. So when I look back, I can see all of those elements coming together, but this took some time to really bring together and focus on and make it all happen and come together as something called connected change. So there was a big government funding. Let me tell you, back up before I start. Government funded organizations in Canada. So healthcare is funded by the government. In this particularly convoluted model, which I won't get into, but we have a public healthcare system. It is funded by the government. When you get a change in government, you often get changes to the funding and what is happening. And so we went from what in Canada is known as a liberal government, which focuses quite a lot on public service and the delivery of public services across various sectors. And we moved to a conservative government, which focuses not on that, on other things. And so one of the very first things that happened when the new government came in power was that funding was cut to a number of these organizations. And with that, my position was cut. And so I found myself at the end of a 5-year transformation journey with an organization not having an office to go back to. And again, another big transformational change in my life and part of this story. So as I'm scrambling around trying to figure out where I'm going to go next, every organization that I would normally walk into was having a hiring freeze, shutting their doors. They were laying off people as well. And so there just wasn't anywhere for me to land. And because of family circumstances, I do have a child and I have a husband and I have a life, right? I wasn't really able to move to another, like just pick up and move to another province. It just wasn't going to work for us. And so I had to come up with something new. I had always wanted to try and start and run my own business. Always. I mean, this bug bit me early. I told you that story. And so I decided I was going to go for it. And I launched Chart House Advisory Services overnight, pretty much. And off I went. And I started to consult in change for large organizations. And that has been the focus of my work over the past almost 5 years now. As I've been working with these organizations, I started to learn that clients who had experienced either change failure or had executives who had done change before knew that the cookie cutter approaches weren't going to work for them. And so every single client that I've worked with in my capacity at Chart House has asked me to customize the change approach for their organization. And of course, I mean, this is what I do, right? But they're not looking for, a basic certified change manager. They need somebody who's really going to help them get this done. And why? Because they have had the pain of difficult transformations before. They have had the pain of understanding why certain things won't work. Not only that, but they're part of the organization and they know what's not going to work for them. And so if you come in and tell them, you've got to follow this recipe, you've got to follow these 8 steps, unanimously, I would hear, no, thank you. And so I started thinking about and pulling together connected change as an approach to managing and leading change in complex organizations. And honestly, today, organizations are more complex than they've ever been. They're global. We have multiple cultures that we're working within, right? Dominant cultures, societal cultures, plus the culture of the organization. We're talking about very complex environments, matrixed organizations. There's no more top-down authority. Like, we don't really work that way anymore. Stuff has just gotten more complicated, more complex. So how do you change successfully in an environment like that, where you've got so many moving pieces and so many factors? This is where connected change comes in to fill that gap. And it's not because, I've just read a lot of books and done a lot of research. No, it's because I know that this is what's missing. And not only that, I know that it's been successful. So I hope that helps you understand where I've come from and where I'm going and why I've made a career in change and why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Where do I think we're going? Well, the world is getting more complex. If the last 3 years have taught us anything, it's that the pace of change is faster. We're getting hit with more and more and more change all the time. So we've got to find new ways to do this better. And we have to focus on sustainability. Why? Because going back is not an option. You are going to get hit with another wave of change. So you've got to be ready. You've got to be ready. You cannot be backsliding. There is no time for that. So change sustainability is what we really need to be focusing on. And also, what are those levers in the complex system of the organization that you're going to pull to push that organization over the tipping point and into change? That's what we're all about at Connected Change. We really want to dig deep into that organizational context, make sure we have an excellent handle on that, and then use those levers to make change happen, to make it impactful. Last little fun fact about me. So I started the Change Course podcast about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago. And it's been a really fun experiment and fun thing for me to do. Originally, when I started it, I thought this was a really good way for me to get my ideas down. And then I started noticing that people were kind of interested in what I had to say, which is really flattering, actually. So thank you. But the funny thing is that everyone is like, well, how could you just start a podcast from nowhere? And I'm like, well, actually, okay, it's not that simple. I've been preparing for this probably my whole life. So the part of my story that I left out, that I didn't tell you about, was that from the age of 9 to 15, I was a professional musician. I was a professional child musician, which kind of makes me laugh thinking back. I sang for a classical children's choir here in Toronto, and we traveled all over the globe performing, competing at a very high level. In fact, we were in our little competition circle for a couple of years there. We were best in the world. Hey, why not? And I mean, this was a boot camp to the extreme. Hockey parents have nothing on my parents, let me tell you. Like, these were intense times. And I wanted to do music. That was what I wanted to do in my life. And I was performing at a very high level. I still do. I mean, I do it for fun now. It's more something that I enjoy. But while I was working at the hospital, I was actually part of band, and we were gigging probably about 3 to 4 nights a week, trying to make it, right? In the music biz. We were trying to make it. We really wanted to be musicians. This was something that I thought was gonna happen, right? And if that didn't work out, then I was gonna go to med school. That's really what was going on. Now, I mean, oh goodness, we didn't make it, but most people and most bands don't, whatever. But the interesting thing was, again, with the technology, how this all comes together, was this band I met while I was at the University of Waterloo during my first university degree, my undergrad. And we got together and we were bootstrapping. We wanted to make things happen for ourselves. And the easiest way to get yourself out there was to get radio play. And so what did we do? We recorded an album. Okay, this is the early 2000s, and we were starving students. We had nothing. We had no money. I was working 2 jobs while I was in school, trying to keep my life afloat, and also in this band, and also gigging, and also recording and writing and all of that. But what we did was we pooled our money together, and it was the early 2000s. And one of the guys who was in the band with me was like, hey, I found this really cool online program and we can record, like we can borrow mics from the school, or we can, somehow scrape together some recording equipment and we can actually record this whole album on the computer. And I was like, what? That's amazing. And I have to tell you that learning how to do digital editing back when I was in my 20s is the skill that I have resurrected and used today to actually create this podcast, because I did actually work with this group of amazing people that I was writing with, and we digitally edited the entire album by ourselves and then burned it and then produced it. Like, yeah. Okay, you can't buy it anywhere, so don't ask me, and I'm not going to play any songs from it for you. Just let me make that completely clear. It's never going to see the light of day. I mean, I love it, but it's part of my past. And here's the thing, right? When I went to start this podcast, I did some reading to figure out what I needed to do. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. The same program. I'm using the same program to edit today that I did 20 years ago. It's much better now, and it's really, really good. But that's how I launched a podcast overnight, because I worked on it already 20 years ago. So that was the part that my friend was like, you have to say that because it's really funny. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll tell everybody. Sure. Here you go. There you go. Full disclosure. So if you're like me and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, I don't know if I can start a podcast, give it a try. It's actually not that hard. And I hope that you're successful. Good luck. But yeah, like digital editing, who knew that skill would come back and be useful now in 2023? I use the same skill that I learned 20 years ago to edit all my videos and edit this podcast myself. So anyway, yes, it's not perfectly produced like some of the big ones out there, but I hope that you enjoy listening to it. And yeah, I hope that that's given you a little bit of insight into who I am and where I've come from and how I ended up doing what I'm doing today. Thanks so much for joining us. And goodness sakes, I know this one's really long today. I should really work on being a bit more concise. So what can I learn from this if I look back on everything that's happened and how I've got here? Well, it's been about embracing change. I think my life's direction has changed probably 10, if not 15 times already. And I'm sure it's going to change another 10 and 15 times in the years to come. So it's a matter of embracing change with that sense of openness and opportunity and curiosity. And what can I do with this? And how can I make this better? And that's really the ethos that I'm bringing to Connected Change and in this desire to share all of this with you. So thank you for joining me. And I hope that, like I have changed course a million times, I hope that this journey of us going together down this road of connected change and on this podcast helps you change course when you need to as well. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, I invite you to like, share, rate, and subscribe because it helps others find us. Change Course is brought to you by Charthouse Advisory Services and ConnectedChange.com. Our music is Levity by Emily Clausen. Show notes have moved. We're now at ConnectedChange.com. So visit us there under the Change Course podcast page, and you'll find a list of all the resources that I've mentioned here today. While you're visiting us, sign up for the Change Navigator newsletter. You'll keep on top of all things change, and every month we are sharing exclusive content and resources only with our subscribers. So don't miss out. Sign up at ConnectedChange.com. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to change course.